Hi friends, this is Kishet again, and today the video is about there seems to be a lot of confusion from my friends when I talk about the upcoming true Hindu, Sanskrit speaking, capitalistic dictator in India called Kalki, who will later be called Kalki, right? And not that his real name is going to be Kalki. So I wanted to address this topic and make sure that things what I am saying is clear to all, because yes, I understand this sounds very crazy, outrageous, meaningless, complete nonsense, all these type of things. When people hear that, when I tell them this, that is the future that we are headed towards, they simply cannot comprehend, they simply cannot understand, they think I'm crazy, they think I have listened to some astrologers, or whatever, all these kind of misnotions and misnomers are out there, misunderstandings, and which is very natural. I'm not surprised by it, because these people are, what do you call, they have all been brainwashed, and majority of course, and they have been trained to think within a certain prism, within a certain framework, that whatever, that's all is reality. So they cannot broaden their horizons, they cannot think outside the box, to see what the real facts of how the world works and all these kind of things. So it is but natural for them to believe that this is nonsense, right? And none of such things are going to happen. So let's try to address that in this video, and kind of understand. And again, this is all what I'm going to say is all about logical analysis, right? It is not some divine prediction. It is not some astrologer told me, that's why I'm going to tell you the same thing. None of these stories, or some I got convinced by some crazy video guy on YouTube or whatever. All these are not the reasons. It is just basic logical analysis that will bring not just me, anybody with basic common sense to the same conclusion. Right? Once you analyze logically what the next steps are likely to be, right? And by going through history, it is not, I'm not come up with any rocket science, any new postulations, any new formulas, invention, scientific theory, anything. I am just watching what the trends have been throughout history, right? And we will analyze here in this video the same logical type of trends and see why the coming of Kalki very soon, likely in the next decade or two itself, in this decade or next decade, is the logical outcome for India and for the world. Right? So, which is not very surprising. There is nothing nonsensical. There should be nothing meaningless, or driven by ideology, or influenced by YouTube blogger or anybody, any Swamiji or anything like that in this. But just simple logical analysis and outcome, what do you call, that will come out of such an analysis. Right, so in my previous videos I have already gone over how currently, with the Democrats dispensation in their 100-year of history, how they go about either getting USA involved in various wars around the globe, or they themselves start wars which are unnecessary, and kind of across the globe based on various ideologies. Like for example, the Vietnam War was all about stopping the spread of communism, because if one country fell to communism, then entire region or multiple countries may start falling to communism, and they wanted to stop that. Other than this one thing, there was really no reason for Vietnam War. Right, so it was all about, in during the Cold War days, about these things. So Democrats in this way are very what do you call, ideologues supposedly, and they do very irrational decisions, just because of the which kind of going along with their ideology, though whether it makes sense, doesn't make sense, is not necessarily their primary concern. Same way in dropping the nuclear bomb on Japan as well. So I don't know. It's all about, I guess, their explanation, and they're supposed to be the human, more people valuing human rights and all these things, equality and whatnot is what they pretend to be. But if you see their actions in international policy, that is clearly not what comes out. So again, the dropping of the nuclear bomb, there is simply no logical explanation that anybody can provide as to why this was the right thing to do. Right, it was completely the wrong thing to do, but it doesn't matter. Liberals have done it before, they're likely to do it again as well. Right, and they will give you all kinds of explanations as to why this is the right thing. So like I was explaining, so they're not necessary. This has been the history. So continuing, not just of Democrats in US, we have seen it in UK too. Like when and throughout history. So a power which is dominating the world at any given point is not just going to meekly surrender their domination when their time is up and just say, okay, my days are done, thank you very much, goodbye, and I will let it out to the next guy, hand off the baton and say, okay, bye bye everybody. They are going to do everything in their power in order to maintain their hegemonic status. And whether it in and the most recent example of that is Britain, who in the 19th or 20th century, when they saw that their power is declining as the world dominating power who was ruling majority of the world, and they saw an up and coming Germany which was getting stronger than them, and their position not just in the world, in Europe, but in the world is also threatened by these new players. So what did they do about it? Obviously they didn't just surrender and say, okay, here I will pass the baton over to you guys, now you take over and continue leading the world. They in fact took the world to not one but two world wars, right? And they will give you all kinds of explanations and stories that no, this is not started by me, this is they started the world war and I just reacted and whatnot, blah blah blah. But that's bullshit, right? So bottom line is, they create started two world wars or got two world wars started just in order to stop Germany from overtaking Britain and becoming the new dominant power in the world. And luckily for them, they succeeded to a quite an extent and created new world leaders, that is US and Russia became the new world powers instead of colonialization continuing and just transferring over to a new colonizer, that is instead of Britain ruling the world, Germany starting to rule the world. That's not what happened in history. Right, so today, 100 years since World War II, or almost 100 year, or maybe 100 years since World War One at least, we are in a similar kind of a situation in the world where one of the another Western power is not another, actually two Western powers. So even Russia, you can say, has been weakened quite a while ago itself, and it's kind of, you can even say, lost in the last throes of its holding on to the power on the world stage. And United States, which is also has been a preeminent power, or in almost like a only superpower in the last 20 or 30 years, plus one of the major superpowers for over the last 100 years, say since World War II, probably you can actually say since the start of the 1900s itself, they were growing power, though, yeah, for a while Britain had not totally come down yet. Still, even after World War II, you can say the real fall of Britain was post World War One. But in any case, America was still a rising power since the 1900s, right? So the power and the number one status of United States now is already in question, and we have a new rising power, that is China, on the horizon, right? So obviously the same theory that applied 100 years ago is going to apply once more. Is the United States and especially the Democrats going to just silently say, okay, boss, my turn in history is over, and I can no longer be the number one country, and I'm just going to hand over the baton and peacefully be quiet and let China take over from here and run the world. That's clearly not going to happen, right? So the United States is not going to give up its position simply just quietly and hand it off to someone else. So they are going to do everything in their power in order to prevent, especially a country like China, which is a dictatorship, which according in their mind is now different than the Nazi Germany, right? With a very cruel dictator trying to impose their ways and all these kind of things across the globe. So though they may be way larger than Germany and way more powerful, but so is the United States, way larger than UK and way more powerful likely as well at this point in history. So that the size doesn't matter, but the theory is similar. So they're not going to just surrender and give the power over to China. And not just them, even other countries like India and folks who are in the neighborhood of China are not going to just say, yes, boss, yeah, China is the new boss. I'm going to start saluting them now instead of saluting the United States. They are going to be apprehensive about the new boss taking over as well. And they will also be more than willing and more than happy to go along with whoever, United States or other friends of theirs, like the UK, to kind of help and see if there is a way that they can prevent this change, prevent the change of the boss. Is there a way that the old boss can be made to drag on a little more, or new boss could be cut out so he never comes to the throne at all, and so and so they don't have to salute this new boss. So if at all something of that nature it will be possible, they surely will want to give it a try and go along for the ride and see what happens, right? And though and if they can prevent it, they can then avoid any negative consequences also. But in case something happens and they are not able to prevent the new boss from taking over, then they could face some wrath from the new boss or things like that. But at least in World War, in the previous century, Germany would never get to the chance, though United Kingdom declined in its power and its empire had ended. It still made sure that Germany did not become the number one power in the world, and that the new world, and did not start saluting Germany and Hitler and all these folks. And though United Kingdom itself lost its status and declined as a world power, it still ensured that Germany did not rise to be the new world power. So similar kind of a situation is likely what the Democrats will aim for in in the coming decade or two, as they see China rising further and United States sinking and continuing to lose its world domination and world position as we know it. And what will aid to these factors is not going to become like, from where we are to right now in the world to straight to World War III or something overnight, right? It's not like an overnight thing like that. Oh, I see the other guys built a factory or built something, built a ship, so I'm going to start war. It's not going to be that simple. So obviously, wars of this large nature are a process in itself. They're not going to start just by simply for no reason, right? So let's kind of analyze for a little bit how we will go from where we are right now to the point where we might be in World War III in the coming future. We're not talking now decades, we're not talking centuries any longer, we're talking few years, maximum a decade or two. That is still maximum a dozen years, or maybe I wouldn't say 2 dozen, but less than 2 dozen years is where I see that such a major conflict as the eventuality that will be coming. Can it be avoided? Sure, it can be avoided. Nothing is fixed in stone, right? But what are the likelihoods? If you look at history, Has these type of conflicts have ever been avoided? I would, there might be rare one or two examples, but I would say think that throughout history, this is how the the world has worked. So yes, the number, the weapons, the technology, the players, the reasons, the excuses, those may have changed, but the outcome has clearly not changed. Right, or how this the world works in terms of how one power loses its status while another power gains status has not changed. Whether it is the switch over from the Hindus, who were like originally, you can say, dominating the world till until 1,000 years ago or so, especially in all over across Asia, when and then the rise of Islam, or the rise of Christianity, and later on the rise of the West, and kind of the decline of Islam, and then the Western powers like UK and others rising up. So you can look at it throughout history. So it's never been a smooth transition where just one guy hands off the baton and says, "Okay, my time is done. Now you go ahead." Right. So all these type of periods have always, the transition has happened after a major war, though back then these were not called world wars. Like the conquest of India by Islamic powers is not defined as a world war in any history, because obviously the technologies were not there. But that is a time in history where the power shifted from India being the dominant power in Asia and spreading the religions like Buddhism across Asia, to Islam becoming the dominant power. Similarly, 500 years later, after this happened, say around 1000 AD or so, if I in 1500 AD, the Western civilizations rising up and they taking over the dominant status from the Islamic, civilizations, and that again will have brought about its own major wars and conflicts, including in the conflict of taking over power in India from the Islamic and other kings and forces that were there, and how Britain conquered India. These are all world wars too, right? Not only India, of course, all across United States and every place, Australia, all over the globe. So these are world wars too. But and then the powers fighting amongst themselves, UK, France, and whoever else, Spanish and everybody. So these are some forms of world wars, though they have not been defined, or haven't been given the term world war by historians. There were world wars taking all over the place, in terms of one power not wanting to give up the old power, wanting to stay in, retain its strength and position, but the new power challenging it, and then there being a major war between the two before the other one can take over its place. So the same thing has happened even earlier, not just in the 19th or 20th century. So now coming to the 21st century where we are today, so it is again a highly likely scenario that this is going to repeat itself, and United States, especially Democrats, are not going to just willingly give power to China, right? So what are the scenarios that will drive us to that? So now we are already seeing a belligerent Russia, which has started a war with Ukraine, and and Americans are already giving us theories that Soviet Union, Putin wants to recreate the old Soviet Union. He's not going to stop with Ukraine. He's going to keep advancing westwards, and wanting to rebuild the old Soviet Union, which obviously America is going to be opposed to and will fight him, even if it means world war or nuclear war, or doesn't matter what the risks could be. They're obviously going to want to stop him from doing anything of this nature. And then who has it created as an ally of Russia today? It is very clear to everybody in the world that China has now nearly aligned almost totally with Russia, Right, as an adversary, as it was already there were issues between the United States and China, and now that this Russia-Ukraine conflict has also erupted, it's kind of helped in drawing the lines even more harder in the sand as to who is on which side, right? So if the world was unsure that which group it would belong, like for example there were many countries including India which were reluctant to go on one side or another. But with these type of conflicts, and even many of the European countries were not sure whether they were still close to Russia or whether they had totally moved over to the US camp or not. So, but this conflict is going to convince more and more countries to pick sides and align themselves into one camp or another, based on their own nation's interests and where their loyalties lie, and kind of set the stage and move us towards a world conflict between two sides, right, which are two warring parties with a bunch of, both having a coalition of their own. So which the side with the obviously they will have picked based on their own interests and what they think is best for them. Or in some cases it could be a dictator who just is crazy and may decide I want to go this way or that way. Anyways, so these lines are getting drawn clearly, and the alliances are forming. And as you could see, as we have seen in the recent past, NATO is suddenly re-emerging as a force in Europe. Until then, everybody was like lazy and sleeping, and there was NATO looked like it didn't have any bite, and it was kind of losing its significance. So now it is back. Similarly, there is Quad in Asia, on the eastern side with Japan, Australia, the main players, India, the reluctant player, but now is becoming more and more active and more willing to join with the United States in this Quad, alliance. Similarly, in the Arab world, there is another alliance in the Middle East, which is I think what they call it, I2U2 or something. Right, so which is at most recent, which is like the Middle Eastern Quad, if you will, with UAE, Israel, and India is in that as well, along with what do you call? And this is a anti-Iran alliance, really, along with United States, of course, which is in all of these, a key player who will lead to World War III. Right, so these alliances are forming, and they will continue to. There is talk of letting other countries into the Quad, like maybe Vietnam or whoever. And similarly the I2U2 and NATO and all these are obviously also going to continue to be expanded. Like for example, NATO now suddenly wants to include out of the blue two new countries, Finland and Sweden, I guess, if I may be wrong on the exact names of these countries. I think these are the two which are bordering almost on share border with Russia, and they have been neutral forever, but suddenly they want to join the NATO, because they perceive threats from Russia, right? So like as you see, similarly same kind of things will be happening in in the Quad as well. Who knows, one day they will want to try to include Taiwan as well, sorry, not Iran, into the Quad, because that's another place which is having a serious direct threat that from China. And there as well tensions between US and China are on the boil, right, when it comes to Taiwan. So you will see that these military alliances will continue to grow. And what do you call? And so though Quad today is not defined, or India does not want to define it as a military alliance, is they want to call it just as a cooperation place, and we'll talk about COVID and climate change and whatnot. Sooner or later you will see that whether it's called Quad or whatever it might be called, there is going to be military alliances also being formed, and reluctant countries like India and many others will be forced to pick sides, as these tensions increases. And now economics is also a weapon in war, as we have been seeing since the Ukraine war. these type of things were not happening in the world, I guess, for at least 30 to 40 years. Maybe they happened during the like the 100 years during the colonization phase eras and stuff. But since then the world kind of had moved to a what people believe is the rule of law and world order and all these liberal stuff terms, that and we were operating on this basis. So weaponizing commodities or trade was not necessarily the norm. Yes, America used to do it in some small countries like Iran or Iraq or places like that. They would impose sanctions, but it was not like on a world scale, wherein Russia would like cutting off their entire oil to Europe, and America saying I'm not going to buy Russian oil at all, or America and Europe. And these type of things were definitely not at this scale until recently. And now you will see that there in fact we were more moving towards more closer our business and more intertwined trades, or what was happening for the last say about 50 years, where all the world economies got more connected and more aligned and were doing more businesses. But over the next 5 or 10 years, you will see the opposite likely to happen, where every country will say that, no, I don't want to do business with this guy, I don't want to do business with that guy, he's not my friend, and he's trying to threaten, my interests, so I won't work with him. So all these type of things are also going to be on him or her, of course, and of course all the other genders in between, depending on who chooses to be what gender, which country. Anyway, so not to offend any liberals with choosing the wrong gender or wrong pronouns. Anyway, so what do you call? So people will and countries will start choosing things in this form fashion, which is not good for the world and which is not good for business. It is not good for the people as well. But that's the way unfortunately the world is likely to go. So, and eventually these business conflicts and these conflicts of commodities and things are what will trigger the economics, is what is going to trigger the final military war, wherein the shooting starts, where the shooting begins. So the economics is the fundamental thing, finally, right, which is going to be the trigger, in my opinion at least. So of course we have already gone over the parallels between what happened in the first part of the last century versus how many of them are repeating in this century, that is pandemic. And then years later there was the world war, and then there was after that, there was the depression before the world war. So we started with pandemic in the 1915 or so. We had the Spanish flu pandemic in the last century. So similarly we have had the COVID pandemic now, and later after that we had that great depression. So we might be looking like the world is now heading to a greater depression, or if not the greatest depression, which is very likely. United States has already gotten into a recession, and there is prediction from IMF and everybody else that are observing the world economy that the world may be going into a recession soon. And given the amount of inflation that everybody is suffering, which is in a multi-decade highs in the West, at least in US and Europe and UK, if not everywhere, like maybe not necessarily in China, India, and such places, or even in most of the Middle East, maybe they may not be at the worst ever, but in US, Europe, it is definitely pretty high. So in order to combat, or in order to stop this, the Federal Reserve, the central banks in these places are forced to raise interest rates to stop the inflation. And all this inflation was caused by the money printing, not really by COVID or whatever excuses they have been giving you. All right, so this has been a decade of money printing since 2008, economic collapse, wherein the Federal Reserve followed Keynesianism as they've always been following. And but only difference probably was This time, United States and Obama not just did things in America, but they convinced the entire world, nearly the whole world, that is Europe, Japan, India, everybody, to go along with their failed policies, which at that point were sold as the greatest policies that anybody could embark on. And they went back to lowering interest rate down to zero and negative in many places like Japan and Europe, and printing trillions of dollars and pumping it into the economy. This was sold as the solution to the 2008 crisis, which was again a crisis created by low interest rate and more printing money. But all they did was double down on the same thing, thinking that that is the medicine that is going to cure the problem. And all the yes, and for a while everybody was happy, and everything looked so great. Then and that things were again, the stocks started booming, the housing, real estate, every asset started going up. So people forgot about the reality that this is not a solution and this is only going to lead to a bigger disaster, and they were all partying for a while. Right, and of course China took advantage of this as well, and they grew their own economy, and they kept on competing with the United States and becoming stronger. So over the last 8 or 10 years, while the United States kept going deeper into debt, kept printing more and more money, including not just United States and Europe as well, and even Japan, right, goes deeper into debt, prints more and more money, and goes more, and spends like crazy, and keeps losing production. At least most of Europe and most of United States continues to lose production and factories, and most of these continue to keep going, getting transferred to places like China. And of course some other countries have benefited from it too, like maybe Vietnam and India, and just to name a few, Bangladesh and stuff, but primary beneficiary still being China. So this has continued on, and now we are at a stage where the world could be facing another major crash and a major recession, which could be worse than the recessions that we have seen so far. We have seen recessions in 2000 with the dot-com bubble burst. We have seen the housing crisis of 2008. So I think the crisis that we are heading to in the next coming years, it's not probably now, it's not even years, it's even months away, is likely to be bigger than anything most people will have experienced in their lifetime. Right, and it is likely to be something comparable to the 1929 Great Depression type of a crisis. Right, and whether it is going to be deflationary like 1929 when the world was on a gold standard, or inflationary, in my opinion, again, I think it is likely to start out as deflationary, because as these asset bubbles burst, and as we are seeing already in the last in the first 6 months of 2020, the asset values are going down, whether it is Bitcoin, whether it is IPO stocks, whether it is FANG stocks, all these values are dropping. And even the value of gold is dropping at this point, because people who are selling all these assets, and slowly it is starting in the real estate market as well, are rushing into the US dollar, making the US dollar one of the most valuable currencies, again, and making it rise against most countries around the globe. Like for example, euro is now become 1 to 1. Indian rupee has hit a new low of 80 against the dollar and stuff like that, right? And yeah, Japanese yen is probably 150 to the dollar or something. It's at another low. So the dollar has risen across the globe despite this massive inflation. And the dollar has risen even against gold. In gold prices have dropped in dollars, right? So this is a deflationary effect, that the bursting of the bubble, by raising of the interest rate by the Federal Reserve to counter the inflation that has been created, and that is now visible not just in the stock market but even in the supermarkets. For almost a decade, the inflation was only seen in the stock market, because stock prices and asset prices were the only ones increasing, and the the food prices and oil prices and those prices were not increasing. So everybody thought, oh, this is amazing and it's a great economic boom and all were making money, and they were like, everybody felt like, oh, they were getting rich, right? But now, as the inflation started getting into the supermarket and not just in the stock market, then everyone and politicians and all started to begin to worry. Oh my gosh, my cost of living is going up. I need to act, and everyone is in a desperate panic. Rather than this being obvious to them, it's a surprise how this is suddenly happen. Though we have been, they thought that they were pursuing the greatest policies imaginable, and then now all are forced to act, and the Federal Reserve has barely increased interest rate by 1% or 2% now, and we are already seeing major panic in the markets. They're down over 30%, especially the Nasdaq, which is the tech index with all the the craziest of names in there, the most speculative IPOs and Bitcoin related stocks and whatnot. That is where the majority of the crash has been, while other indexes like S&P and Dow have also reached 20% drop at least, though they may have recovered from there a little bit in the last few days. So, but in any case, this is just the beginning of the crash, that we are likely to see, and this is going to lead, in my opinion, to a greater depression than what we saw in 1929, because the amount of money printing, the amount of reckless monetary policy, the spending money. This, of course, applies to both Republicans and Democrats in the United States, and similarly, Congress and BJP in India. Right? It's not like any one person is only responsible. Both have pursued similar policies, and both are equally to blame in terms of economics. And this is where we have come to where the last decade of the 2010s, like how we had the roaring 20s before the Great Depression, in my term for the 2010s is the soaring 10s, right? So like the roaring 20s, we have had the soaring 10s where everything was soaring, whether it is the asset prices of stocks, real estate or anything, and even bonds. And similarly, not just those, but even debt, deficits, money printing, everything was soaring. Right. So now hope it is going to come and catch up with the world in this 2020s, wherein the inflation is already here. So in order to combat this inflation, by raising these interest rates, the soaring tens have ensured that the economy is so dependent on cheap money and low interest rates that it is going to have a real fit if these things are removed. But unfortunately, the Fed is in a box. Given that inflation is going so high, they have no choice, Fed and other central banks, that they have to raise interest rate in order to control the inflation. Otherwise, it's going to become a situation where poor people cannot even afford to make a living. That's while the rich have gotten rich, during, for example, during the pandemic, most of the rich were doubled, tripled, quadrupled their income, and their stock prices were soaring, while the folks were having difficulty even getting food, right? The poor millions across not just the globe in poor countries, but even in rich countries and like the West, had trouble even finding food and being able to just feed themselves and their families, while all the fat cats on Wall Street were only minting money and doubling, tripling their net worths. Right. So this was the situation, and it would have gone from bad to worse if inflation was not combated. So Fed had no choice, and Fed and other central banks, but to come in and try, do something in order to prevent this runaway inflation. But as they did that, they are compromising, or they are causing a crack in the bubble that they have built over the last decade. And this, the more they continue to do this interest rate hikes, the more they are ensuring that we will have a bigger crash than 1929. So let's now further analyze how such a situation is likely to lead the world into a World War III scenario. So continuing on, we understood that how this crash or a depression is going to come about, and likewise I was mentioning initially, though it may be a deflationary depression, as all the asset values crash and people start rushing into the dollar, even people outside the United States, because even other currencies they feel are though it is the wrong thing to think, but in their mind the dollar is supposedly safer than their own currency, like the rupee or the yen or the euro or any of these ones. Maybe we have to see how the yuan fares, the Chinese one, but all the others are also probably going to rush into the dollar, though really dollar is the worst currency in the world because it has the maximum debt. United States is the most indebted country, not just in the world today, probably in the history of countries. Like that is the kind of debt that they have taken on, which is cross 30 trillion and most likely impossible to pay. And if you add on all these various unfunded liabilities, it's probably crossed 100 trillion is how much the government really owes, which is not not at all possible to be paid off. Right, it's going to be, even if it is, it will be a super uphill task. But anyway, so people for the short term will rush into the dollar, and then as the economy starts going into depression and really bad recession, if not depression, the government is going to have to, and the Fed will have to step in again, lower interest rate, print like crazy, and this time to save the economies from the crisis that we are going to see, which is going to be worse than 2000 and 2008 in my opinion. They are going to have to do 5 times or 10 times the amount of printing that they did during the 2008 crisis, right? So if the stimuluses back then were 1 trillion, 2 trillion, we may need 5 or 10 trillion stimuluses now. If the amount of total money, whatever, TARP and WARP and all kinds of programs that they did was about, 3 to 5 trillion at that time, today we might need 10, 20, 30 trillion in order to reflate, in order to bring the economy back from the doldrums. It can go to even to days that are like 2015 levels, forget about 2022 or the peak levels. Even to get it back to something like a 2015 level from the lows may take that amount of printing, and you have to restore things back to at least halfway to what they used to be in 2022. To get asset prices back to that level is itself going to take that kind of printing. And what is that going to do to the dollar, right? So eventually it is going to be it will turn from a deflationary situation to a highly inflationary situation, especially in the United States, right? Because they have no other choice. They have promised, given with Democrats and politicians of this nature. Similar kind of problems will be in Europe as well, with more and more liberals and socialists coming in, getting elected. They are going to keep promising all types of freebies, and when as much they will try to raise folks' taxes as much as they can, but when none of that is still sufficient, they're going to have to print massively. Right, so very quickly this inflationary crisis is going to start becoming into the initial deflation will very quickly turn to an inflationary crisis. And then when this kind of economic pain continues on for a while, right, we're not talking 1 year, 2 year now, it may be 4 5 years of first deflation, then inflation, all these type of pain for the normal people. This is what kind of gets countries on the edge. Just like in 100 years ago, the Great Depression started in 1929, and people suffered through almost the early part of the 1930s, right, all the way till 1935, maybe 1936. Though FDR is rated as the greatest president ever possibly in the United States, in fact the suffering under him was the worst. Right, not only did we have the Greatest Depression, which could have been solved very easily, but he did all kinds of socialistic policies and made things worse and prolonged the Great Depression. Plus we also the world also went into a World War II right after that. So that is the kind of situation where the tempers go crazy, and even Keynesians will probably come and say, hey, war is great for economy, let's go for war, because that's going to cause so many buildings, so much economic activity. And they will even tell you that America came out of the Great Depression because of World War II. So they are going to advocate similar kind of policies now and say, okay, hey, great, it's great, let's go start a world war. Right? Small wars are not enough. They're going to only rebuild so much. We need a real big war. And as it is, the economic tensions with China supplying so many goods to the United States, people are going to get mad about it with China. So there is going to be lots of suffering and madness and, people going crazy, which are all and acting irrationally as well, which is what, in my opinion, is what is going to be the trigger to the world war. Though, like, the flashpoints and the tension and the friction and all that is already there today. But we are not in a situation. There might be even small wars like the one we are already having in Ukraine. Alright, and then there might be one that we might have in Taiwan or across the border with India. So there will be skirmishes, there will be small wars. These could still happen as of right now, but I don't think we are yet in a situation where the tempers are so high that we are going to get into a world war as yet. But down the line, maybe in 5 years or 7 years, the way things are going to go economically is going to make people so mad that they might want to, and not that they might want to, but they'll just go irrational and be at a position or a situation where they will push for such type of a war, right? So, and again, the parallel between World War II and World War III is going to be, obviously, here the main war is between, then it was between Britain and Germany, whereas now it is going to be between United States and China. And back then, Britain and United States kind of used Russia, which was the other big power, to do the real hard fighting, because they were the ones who really fought Germany. Not that the America or Britain did not fight, but their role in it was really smaller, way smaller. So Russia did the major sacrifice. They had millions of their people dead. They had to go street by street, mile by mile, all the way from nearly Moscow to Berlin, defeating the German army all along the way. And they were the guys who made the real sacrifice, right? While America, even against a small country like Japan, I don't think they did send their troops and invaded. They just resorted to dropping the nuclear bomb. Again, America meaning Democrats, right? So they took the easy way out, sort of, in a way, and which is the most horrible way for humanity. But still, that's the way they chose. So they did not have the guts to really go fight it out like how the Russians did. So the same is going to be the scenario now, or probably even worse, because America is going to be very hesitant and would not want to have as many as its ground troops engaged. Right, so they would want to limit the amount of troops that they would have to be engaged in a World War III type scenario, especially against China, which is a billion population. So they don't want, and America is only like 1/3 of that, maybe 300 million. And of them, again, we have to see how many are able-bodied, and of course now women also can fight, right? So the population, so the size of the army required and the number of people that are going to be involved in a fight against China is going to be easily 10 times probably the what would have been required against Japan. Right? So, possibly, of course, we have modern weapons and all that. I'm sure you'll agree it won't be that high. Even if it is 3 times, even if it is 5 times, that still is a huge number for United States. So, obviously, they're not going to want to fight this all by themselves. So, they will be looking for who is it that they can outsource some of this work to, just like they outsource IT or manufacturing or some other stuff today. Some of the military fighting also they outsource to Mexico and stuff by getting their citizens into the army with the promise that they can become American later, and those guys kind of fight as contractors or whatever, or even regular army men. So similarly, the chances are very highly likely that they're going to outsource the bulk of World War III. And it's also not just China, it's on the other side, the World War III is also going to be against the Muslims, which are by themselves a billion population in population, right? So this is all the Iran, Syria, Turkey, all these bunch of countries out there, all coming together as well. Pakistan, of course, the main one with nuclear weapons, together against the United States and joining along on the Chinese side. So kind of like how Japan was aligned with Germany back in World War II, the Muslims are likely to be aligned with China in World War III against United States and Europe. So who are they going to turn to? So the main person who is today willing to sign up for this is very likely to be RSS of India. Is going to be India, and the party in power is the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, the RSS, and the leaders from the RSS. Currently it is Narendra Modi, but very highly likely that the next Prime Minister of India after Modi, I have made videos on that, could be Yogi Adityanath. Right? So when what do you call Yogi Adityanath is likely to be in charge over the in about 3 to 5 years time. So there is a high possibility that if this world war happens in the next 6, 7, 8 or within 10 years, Yogi Adityanath is also a pretty young leader at this point. He's only in his early 40s. So he could very well be the Prime Minister of India during this world war, and he is already very willing and ready to pick fights and start wars with his opponents locally as a chief minister. And and he's very fond of taking the bulldozer and going and raising their properties, or taking such type of actions. So imagine the situation where if he becomes the prime minister, and if Pakistan and China are trying to encroach into Indian territory, or which they have already encroached, right, into parts of India, how would a Yogi Adityanath react in such a situation, and what would he be willing to take, like how he does a bulldozer now against these countries, Pakistan and China, to kind of go teach them a lesson and provide a strong reaction to what they might be willing to do, and what kind of a outcome would some action like that end up in for the entire world, not just for that particular region, right? So this United States, that is again Democrats, likely to be again Kamala Harris, the most likely candidate to be president, not right after in 2024, hopefully not, at least Trump comes in and we might have 3-4 years of sanity, at least until 2028. But 2028 onwards, it is very highly likely that Kamala Harris may return, right, and she might be the president, and she might be the one who is working with Yogi Adityanath. Similarly, in the UK, there could be Rishi Sunak, who is right now in the race for election. So even if he doesn't get elected now, there is a likely chance that he might come back in a few years and be the prime minister in United Kingdom. So these three guys work together, could be the leaders of World War III against China, Russia, and the Muslims, right? So I have a video on that. So that is the highly likely scenario of a World War III coming up soon. So now, having gone through this with India being the primary heavy lifter, right? So doing the heavy fighting, both sides on one side of which against China and the other side against Muslims. So a likely, and if it goes nuclear, which is very likely given that Democrats are the only ones who have used nuclear weapons before and are highly likely to use it again. So even though it may not be them who started, they may get India or even Pakistan may go crazy and be the first one to use it. So that who would start it is not clear, but it is likely that this type of war could go nuclear very easily as well. So in that type of a situation, India could be facing a three-side nuclear war with three nuclear neighbors right next to it, one on China on one side, Pakistan being the other, and the third one, surprisingly, is likely to be Iran, because Iran, though, does not have nuclear weapons today, but given Democrats' policies, they have done it in the past, they're likely to do it again. Iran is very likely going to be a nuclear weapon state very sooner or later. You will ask, okay, oh, it's gone crazy, Democrats are working to stop this, but they were working to do the same with Pakistan too. But what happened? Bill Clinton got in 1992, and in 1999 he had 7 to 8 years to stop Pakistan, but he could not stop them. Finally, Pakistan tested its nuclear weapons in 98 or 99 and became a nuclear weapon state right under Clinton presidency. So same is likely to be the case, even if Trump is able to stop them for a few years, Iran, from getting the nukes. It is unlikely that Democrats are going to be able to stop them. They may do all kinds of deals which are really giveaways and don't really stop Iran. Right, and eventually there might be a nuclear state by then, and in World War III, India may be facing a three-side nuclear war situation, and with India having to do the most sacrifice as well as the most of the fighting, with of course help from Europe and America. Not that they're not going to help or they're not going to use their troops even, but they may have to play a lighter role, with India playing the bigger role, right? So this is the likely situation. So again, talking on this topic, looking at India, let's also now analyze the situation in India as it is. So not only is India likely to be involved in World War III, but that's still about 5 or 10 years away, like we were discussing. So what is the scenarios between now and then that could also be happening in India, right? So kind of analyzing and understanding India for a little bit. So first of all, Indian democracy. So primarily there are, you can say, more like three parties, if you want, right? If you want to call it, are the major parties in India in the democracy. So number one is the Congress party. The Congress party has ruled India for over 70 years now, or 50 plus years among the 75, right? And everybody has seen what the Congress has done and what their politics is, and people are now at least finally gotten fed up with them, and most places they are getting routed. So the second major party which has been in India and which has gotten power, though it's not one single party, it is now broken into multiple parties, is the Janata Party. So they got 2 or 3 opportunities in independent India to come to power, and they won the election and they were given chance to rule, and all the 3 times they failed miserably. They could not complete the full 5-year term, and they were changing prime ministers every within a year of coming to power due to infighting, and finally their government fell all 3 times within 2 years, right? So then the people of India have tried them as well, the Janata Party. So now finally the other big party that is out there that folks haven't tried and finally are giving chance now is the Bharatiya Janata Party, that is the BJP, the current ruling party of India, who are the political wing of the RSS, which is like a separate organization, a voluntary organization, which is primarily which is made by Hindus and for the propagation of Hindutva, right, without going to so this is basically the 3 parties. So now India is in a situation where they have already tried and tested the first 2 parties, that is the Congress and the Janata Dal, and now and they have seen that they are unable to deliver and they are not able to fulfill the aspirations of the people. Of course, you can say Congress to an extent in a non-Gandhi government when Narsim Rao or Manmohan Singh were the prime minister, though the Manmohan Singh prime ministership, Sonia Gandhi was the real kind of power wielder, but in spite of that, under these two governments, definitely India progressed. We had a lot of improvements, a lot of capitalism was brought in, reforms done. India's growth rate went from 3% to 6, 7, 8% plus, right, during these terms. So during the non-Gandhi periods, we definitely have had better governance from Congress than any time during the Gandhi family rules, whether it was Nehru or Indira Gandhi or Rajiv Gandhi, because then we only had socialism and things were only getting worse. Economic conditions of people in India as well as the politics, right? So those things were really bad at those times. So but in any case, so these parties have been tried and tested, so and we know that they are unable to deliver. So finally the Indian people are in their last hope, which is the Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP, and are hoping that these people can deliver for them. But what are they delivering? Let us kind of analyze that. Where are we headed in India? So we already talked about this Great Depression. So the India is unlikely to be untouched by this or can somehow escape the effects. So the same kind of money printing that the Obama convinced the world to do, India was also party to it. And under the Manmohan Singh government, not just that, even under the Modi government since 2014, the same kind of policies have continued. And we have not had the right reforms that were necessary. We have gone back, in fact, under Modi, more into Indira Gandhi type socialism policies. Right? So we are likely to suffer given this, that we have not done the reforms necessary either under Manmohan Singh or under Narendra Modi in order to take advantage of the global situation when there is a depression or anything of that nature and grow India. India is likely to join along and face similar type of bad economic problems, with the poor having to suffer the most in the upcoming economic situation. If it is turns out to be as bad as I think, which unfortunately I think it is, because of the amount of money printing for over a decade that has gone on even in India, the real estate, like just like China, we have gone like 1,000 times, in the last 20 years or something. That's the kind of appreciation most real estate in most major cities have happened. That is completely insane and unsustainable. Right? So even the stock market is gone up 5 times, 10 times from the, like, say, from 2000, where the Sensex was probably about 2000. At that time, in the year 2000, it was 2000 or something in that range. And today it's crossed 60,000, which is completely insane. Right? So recently it had crossed 60,000. We're almost close to that now once again. So that is the kind of unsustainable growth, and majority of it is just inflation and money printing and unsustainability. And so when the crash arises, India is not going to be untouched. They are going to become part of the situation. I think the life of the Indian people is going to be very tough, especially the poor, over the next decade, in this coming decade, given this type of an economic situation. On top of that, the Modi government is pursuing a policy of clear anti-minority, anti-Muslim, right? And to an extent they are right as well, because these Muslims have been over pampered and they are starting to sit on people's head and taking things for granted, feeling entitled in India as well to a large extent, especially as the Congress government was totally kind of, you can say, leaning towards them and doing policies that were even hurting the Hindus. So now, in trying to balance that out, the Bharatiya Janata Party, the BJP guys, are kind of actually going overboard in a lot of ways and creating more unnecessary tension between the two communities. And the signs of this are already visible all over the place, with a lot of tension and skirmishes and things like that. Though it's at a very low scale at this point, the chances of this resulting in a mahadanga, in a major riot like how we had during the same, again going back to the last century. So we were discussing, we had first the pandemic, then the Great Depression, then World War II. But within a few years post World War II, World War II started in 39. In 47, when India became gained independence, it was split into two countries, India and Pakistan, and there was massive Hindu-Muslim riots, right, between the two communities, as this country was split and people were moving from one place to another, right, based on their religion. So a atrocity or a riots of that type of scale is again very likely in India, the way the current policies are. And obviously this time there is not going to be any partition, right, because nobody is going to support that. So that means that the two populations have to fight it out within the same boundaries or same geography, until some kind of peace comes about. So that is also another major risk that is likely that the Indians could be facing. The people of India, whether you're Hindu or Muslim, it's not like only Muslims are going to die in such riots. Even the Hindus are going to suffer. And of course, all this is on the brunt of the burden is going to be borne by the poor. The rich will find ways to escape, right? So they're not going to be troubled as much by this. So it's all going to be falling on the poor people. So within the next decade, under the BJP government, where people have so much expectation and they think like these people are almost like gods on earth and they cannot do anything wrong. So rather than seeing great outcomes that everybody is dreaming about and hoping about, and talking about 5 trillion economy and developed country by 2047, and these are all what the talks are. So rather than seeing such positive things, it could be very likely that we may see 3 horrible type of situations. That is what the Indian people may experience under the current BJP government, which is the Mahamandi, massive depression economically, both deflationary initially, which is in a way good for the poor because prices may come down, though they may not have jobs, right? And then inflationary following that, as the money printing goes through the roof. So economics challenges followed, as well as the Mahadanga, which is the massive riots of the scale like 1947 or even worse than that, possible had to happen in the next coming years in India. And then worst of all, World War III, which is likely a 3-side nuclear war between India and its neighbors, right? So having seen situations of this nature and having experienced all the the parties, the 3 parties that are the 3 major parties governments already, and having given all these people chance for 100 years, or at close to 100 years, at least 70-80 years, say by 2030 or so, if you calculate, right? So having seen them all, where will the so suffered, so battered, so bruised, barely hanging on people of India by this time, having experienced all this, where are they going to turn to? Are they going to still have faith in democracy and they're going to say, okay, now I'm going to trust a new 3rd, 4th party that may, like the AAP maybe, who just came about recently in Indian politics? Is that what they're going to do? Or do you think, though the Indian people who are very calm and normally not agitated and they like to endure everything without uttering any word, is this at least going to be enough for the people to rise up and really have a revolution and bring in say enough is enough and bring in a dictator at that point, right? Again, you will say, this is crazy, it's preposterous. No, it's not. Again, let's look at historical precedent. So after every one of these major wars, So the forms of government have changed across the globe, right? After World War I, the Ottoman Empire ended, and all these countries, many of these Middle Eastern countries got freedom from the Ottoman Empire, and then they were obviously ruled by the British for a while. But in any case, the Ottoman Empire ended and Turkey supposedly became a democracy, at least for a while. Similarly, Germany was kind of a democracy, sort of, for a while before Hitler came back. Right, and so you saw an end of an empire. And similarly, Russia. So during the end of the First World War, the czars ended in Russia, and we had the communist revolution. And these guys, that is, Lenin, Stalin, all of them took over, and communism was established in Russia. Similarly, after World War II, the British Empire ended, right? And of course, Britain supposedly in theory was a democracy even before, from quite a while, but they had a worldwide empire and a kingdom. So this kind of ended, and all these kings still remained in Britain, the kingdom, but their significance, their prominence started to wane away, and the entire British Empire is no longer exists, and they are slowly going into the trash can of history, right, as a country. So this is a major change. Similarly, Germany, dictatorship ended after Hitler, and they got democracy, right? So, and India got democracy and became an independent nation. So such type of changes have happened previously in the globe, that such kind of a major war has resulted in the change of the form of government. So it is very highly likely that India will have a change in the form of government, as the people themselves will be sick and fed up, and as it is, there is no alternative to the current BJP at this point. So the alternative is only likely to come from outside the current system, and not likely to come from inside the current system. And if right, so that is one thing that would also be coming out of this war. Plus, once the dictator comes in, how is the world going to be like, right? So yes, this war may have created a lot of deaths, a lot of losses, and hopefully the world will still be surviving by the time, and it won't be like the end of the world, and there will still be some people who might survive and live through this war and make it out alive on the other side. So, and also, the main person who could stop this war is going to be Russia, right? Because Russia is the only one who could engineer a truce between China and India, right? Because America is not going to be able to do that. America will want the war to go on forever. They are not in a position. They will not be the ones, especially Democrats, are not going to be the one who will be wanting to broker a peace. And even if they wanted to, it's no guarantee that China is going to listen to them. Whereas if it is Russia who does it, then the likelihood of both India and China willing to listen to Russia is surely a lot higher. They have a better chance of getting to peace and ending the war between India and China. And once India and China stop fighting, obviously United States and the others are not going to be able to fight that much, because like I mentioned earlier, they're anyway reluctant fighters in this war, right, who are not willing to sacrifice too much of their men and women, and they want to kind of outsource it to others. So, and that main person who has taken over that outsourcing would have been India. So if they stop, the chance of this World War III ending are very huge. And why wouldn't a BJP government stop it themselves? Because no, if it is a Yogi Adityanath, he is going to not be listening to Russia, and he would most likely align almost completely with the United States, and that's how he will have gotten this war started, because Russia would be advising him not to go to war with China. So he would have ignored those suggestions and taken the country to war. But when he is replaced with a new dictator, who is more willing to see sense and stop the madness, right? So the chances are that person may go and work with Russia to get this war stopped and at least save humanity and not kind of kill it completely, right? With all the crazy nuclear weapons going on.
So without that, maybe if there nobody comes in and nothing changes, who knows? Democrats, and the RSS may take this world. Of course, on the other side, Russia, China too, may take this world to complete end of humanity or end of the world itself. If the war continues on with everybody, nobody gaining any sense and nobody acting rationally, all are going till the end to show that I am greater than you, we might have a situation where the world ends. So hopefully, let's hope that that is not the case, and then this dictator or somebody steps up in India and comes in and works towards getting this war ended. Right? So once this war ends, what is the world going to look like? Is the United States going to still be the superpower? No, given the amount of printing, the amount of money that they are going to be printing between now and then, the losses they take in the world war, the amount of debt that the country is going to be facing, it is very highly unlikely that United States will continue as the superpower. And this is just like after World War II, Britain ceased to be the superpower. Same way, after this World War, United States is likely to cease to be the superpower. Same way, let's look at the situation in Europe and UK. So they will also be devastated completely after this world war. So whatever lead role that they had in the G7 and in shaping the future of the world at this point, again they're going to cease to have that too. And they're going to be in a really bad shape. They have the same kind of problems like America: money printing, socialism, inflation, and not just that, they have left so many Muslims in that they are taking over half the countries, or at least half the areas in many countries over there. So and UK may have a line of Muslim origin prime ministers coming soon here, with so many parties. There are so many people in there infested with these guys. So is Europe even going to retain the a white owned or white dominated culture and white dominated policies and situation? That itself is unclear at this point, right? America may also have pockets in which such type of things may be happening, especially in liberal states, with Democrats letting in so many both people from South America, illegal, legal, all types of immigrants, and people from the Middle East, the Muslims, who will be overrunning some of the places in America, hopefully not the entire USA. Right, so both these powers are unlikely to be able to be the superpower in that situation. Russia is already weak. They've already been weakened. They're no longer the USSR of before. And already with the Ukraine war, there is so many sanctions and so many things against Russia. So, and with a major war like this as on top of that, though they may have a lot of nuclear weapons today, they're going to be in a very pathetic state economically post the war. And right, so then let's talk about China. What about China? China is obviously going to not be able to win this war. So right, so though they may have some great amount of military or economic might, their military might is still in question. Right, they may have been able to buy or build a lot of ships or flights, airplane, military equipment, but the capability of their people in managing these military equipments and fighting a really great war and being victorious in this war is really in question, because China hasn't really fought a major war, forget major, even a minor war of any decent proportion in like decades. Right, maybe 1963 against India is probably the biggest war, and or maybe they did have something with Vietnam, but those are like the India war was just a border war which lasted like 15 days, which is nothing. And the Vietnam war is like against a small, Vietnam is no comparison to China. So can the Chinese military really fight such a big war? Yes, they will be help. They might get help from Russian weapons and Russian army, but I don't think even both of these people, along with the Muslims put together, though they may have a large population, a billion Chinese and a billion Muslims, in terms of military might, they don't stand a chance in front of United States, Europe and India together, right? So, like, very highly likely that China is going to lose the war, and it is even possible that, given the economic situation and the political situation in China, people may revolt against the Communist Party, and just like India may turn to a dictatorship, China may get rid of its communist dictatorship, and it could even break into multiple pieces, with every country declaring independence from the main China, just like how Soviet Union broke down into 14, 15 different countries. Similar kind of a fate may be what China may be looking at that point after post World War III, when the war ends and still, some people survive on this planet. Not that if everybody is dead, then that's the end of the world. There is nothing to talk about, right? I hope that won't happen. So, well, look at the Middle East. So, Middle East is already in a pathetic state. They don't have food to eat, but still they want to cause so many problems around the world. So, economically, these are all basket cases. Majority of them. Yes, there are few countries who have oil or natural gas or some resource of this type, like Saudi Arabia or UAE or Iran, or few of them like Qatar or whoever. Right, so those countries may have some prosperity and some riches, but the majority of the remaining don't even have ability to have 2 square meals every single day. That's the pathetic kind of status they are all in. Right, so what is it that they're going to be after such a major war? They're going to be even worse. What you see in Afghanistan is probably just a sample. It's probably the eventual state of the Middle East is likely to be much worse than Afghanistan, probably more like a Somalia, during the famine or something. That could be how the status of things in the Middle East is likely to be. Right, so given all this situation, how is it the thing? How does India look like under this new dictator? Yes, India will have gone through terrible hardship. They will have gone through terrible loss of life. They will have gone through everything, like bad suffering and all that. But when you look at the rest of the world, India will still be in a better position, where they can, if they get their act together and if they do the right policies, it is very likely that India can become the superpower, replacing all these other powers of today, because they will all have been gotten weak. They will all have gotten bankrupted, and they will, like Europe and America, and they will have many of will have broken into pieces, even like, for example, China and maybe even Russia, which is now like already broken, one of the 15 or whatever pieces remaining of the USSR, but it might have broken into further pieces too. Right, so given this situation and Middle East in a mess, and countries like Japan, Australia, maybe even extinct out of this map, right, because how many nuclear attacks can they take? Possibly some kind of similar kind of fate even on Israel. Right, so how many nuclear weapon attacks can these countries take? They will be wiped out in no time, right? So maybe some of these countries really in very, very terrible shape. So in a world like this, yes, it will be very bad, and nuclear winter, all kinds of climate change, worst of the worst you can imaginable could be happening. But in spite of all that, if humans are able to survive, which we hope they are, they will be, India will be the one with the right policies and the right type of leader who can again rebuild, just like the Germany and Japan rebuilt from World War II and became economic superpowers. Right, so same way India can rebuild, not just India, in starting with India, eventually the whole world, and they can be the superpower under Kalki, who will be the dictator will be given the name Kalki later, once they realize what he is able to do and how he is able to build India, how he is able to restore it back to the old cultural roots of India with the Sanskrit language and the Hindu culture. Right, removing all the brainwashing that the British have left in India, which is democracy, biggest brainwashing. Right, so India has never been a democracy. Democracy does not suit India, right? And people of India will have realized after trying everything they can in a democracy and only ending up in this state. Right, so Indian glory days were always under kings and not in a democracy. So similar is going to be the situation going forward as well with India. And then once India is rebuilt into the superpower, the lone superpower of the world, with the rest of the countries unable to grow to a superpower status for at least the next 1,000 years, if not more, right? So which has always been the case. India has always been the superpower of the world from based on, I don't forget the name of the guy, but there's a European person who did this research, and from the 1st century AD till the 17th or 16th or 17th century, India's GDP was the highest. And if India were together as one country rather than multiple kingdoms, India would have been the superpower all along for all these centuries, except in the last 2 or 3 or 4 centuries, right? So India regaining its old superpower status should not be a surprise, and being able to do it only under a dictatorship and not again in a democracy is also should not be a surprise. These are all very logical, commonsensical things that should be obvious, though I don't know why it is not obvious to all of you. So then we will again go further more into how then once India is the number one power and India is the only country, really major country standing after this type of a massive World War III, and also has a dictator who is running the country. No longer is it a democracy, and no longer does it have all the problems that are there in a democracy, unable to move fast, unable to decide what the right policies are, unable to implement those policies without all kinds of backlash and protest and whatnot. And the positives or the benefits that China has because of it having a dictatorship so far, and how they could grow at 10% plus for over 30 years, but India could not accomplish that. So you will see a change, a complete opposite, where China is struggling. China is unable to get its act together. It's broken into multiple pieces. There is political problems. There is economic problems, all kinds of problems over there. While India, on the other hand, has the opposite. It has the political will, the right form of government to affect great changes and to take the country forward and to grow not just at 15 but 10 but maybe 15, who knows, even 20% plus, under the right leadership, who is able to take strong action and enact the right policies. Right, so we will see how the world, India will look like and how the world will look like. We are now talking in the 2030s and the 2040s and beyond under this dictator who will eventually be later on be given the name or the title of Kalki, though his own name could be anything else. We will go into more depth and discuss how this dictator will come about, where he will come about, what kind of steps he might take in India, and what kind of steps he might take across the globe, and how will the world look like right, after say 2035 to be about 2050 and beyond. क्या हुआ? All right. So now that we have understood how the dictatorship will come about in India, basically going into the World War III, the three Mahas, basically Mahamandi, Greatest Depression, Mahadanga, Greatest Riots, worse than 1947, likely in India, and Mahaparamanu Vishwa Yuddha, that is World War III, nuclear apocalyptic, which finally will be ended by the intervention of the dictator Kalki to throw out the current government in India, then to end democracy and take over as the true Hindu, Sanskrit speaking, capitalistic dictator of India.
right? And who will also end this World War III. And obviously, the amount of population remaining on the planet will be very less compared to what we have today, just because the war will be so heinous and so destruction oriented, with nuclear weapons going off all over the place, that even if somebody survives, that itself is to be considered a miracle. But luckily, this dictator will intervene quite well in advance, before the Democrats, RSS, and the rest end the world completely, right? And have some people still surviving, though the conditions may be bad and terrible. And India, given that it has the largest population, will still have luckily significant amount of people surviving over there, with maybe lesser people in all of the other different countries, but all put together, there'll be sufficient, almost same population as how many survived in India, right? So all of these people put together have to rebuild this world and take it forward, right? So before we get into what will happen under this dictator, let's kind of understand again. I understand this concept is, or this thought itself is like, oh, this is preposterous. What nonsense are you talking? This is the reactions I get. Where did you come up with this, thing? Have you been smoking something? Have you been drinking? Right? These are all the reactions we get when I bring up this topic, or when I suggest that this is the future. Right? So let's try to understand why, who this person who is going to be like, and why is it that he's the one who is going to take over, right? So first of all, see, we have seen in the current Indian situation, I guess, and from in democracy, the most likely or the best person possible that we could have got among the bad people, or the kind of leaders that democracy produces, we already have gotten. That is Narendra Modi, right? So if you hear his speeches, if you hear the vision and the thought he tells us, this is like, it is as if like this is the guy, a real person incarnated on earth, who has all the right thoughts, all the right support as well from the people, and all the everything going right for him in order to deliver. But we have already seen 8 years, and we are hardly able to cross 5-6% of GDP, and let alone in the coming depression, what is the status going to be like economically? Rather than India taking advantage of this situation, we are more likely to be in a bad disadvantage as well, with millions and crores of people suffering, right? Even worse than in COVID. So anyway, coming back to that, so it is very clear, or it will become more and more clear to people in India, that the things cannot be changed in the current democracy, right? So then who can change it? How will things change, right? So obviously, at least in my opinion, the chance of somebody from inside India changing the current situation and taking over is next to nil, right? We have the person who inside India, your best bet was Modi, and we have seen what the outcomes are. So the chances are that you need somebody from outside India, and also what type of somebody educated, who has seen the world, who has seen how developed countries function, and who is educated and smart enough to understand the right type of changes needed, kind of like how Narasimha Rao understood what is the reforms needed for India in order to put it on the development path, and then had the wherewithal to get the right people, whether Manmohan Singh or whoever and the others, and then provide them the political cover, the strength, so that they can go and do their job without all the usual backlash and everything, everybody wanting socialism and freebies in India, which is all the norm, right? So without having all those resistance opposing them, so he was able to do this. But those type of things only happened for a very short while. So, and like for example, Modi tried these farm reforms, and what happened? So there was massive protests, whether it is farm reform, whether it is selling Air India, any step you try to take, there is only protest, and in the end nothing happens, or nothing much happens. So he had to pull back on farm laws, he had to pull back on privatizing the railways and go really slow,
all these steps, and he hasn't sold a single bank yet to private companies, right? Government bank. So none of these reforms are possible in a democracy, because people are so used to freebies and going with all these and their negative or whatever socialistic thinking, even when you talk to the experts, that capitalism doesn't suit India and all these. So you only under a dictatorship can these type of really bold actions be taken. Right, so it's never not very unlikely in a democracy. And even in a democracy, if you replace Modi and RSS, what are you going to get? You are going to get a Kejriwal, right? That he is supposedly the primary opposition, or becoming at least in the future, who is a pakka socialist, though he might have gone to IIT. Right, he's worse than Indira Gandhi and Modi in terms of socialism and freebies. So these people are not going to be able to change India. So you are most likely it is going to have to be a person who is educated maybe in India but lived outside, understood the Western society, seen how developed nation works, and he would be the one who is willing to come back, sacrifice for like how Trump sacrificed his career to become president to fix the country. Same way sacrifice his life of living and spending outside the United States, and take the burden on him to come back and get involved in the dirty political system of India and work towards changing it. Right, so what are the chances? So chances of this person coming from United States or UK or places like that is very likely. But though he might have lived there most of the time, United States, Europe and India and China and all these places are going to be very badly affected during World War III, that Democrats and RSS are likely to bring, right? Join together against China and Russia, and like we discussed. So he has to escape this World War. So the most likely place, again in my mind, where a person can go to escape this war and the nuclear bombs that might be going off all over the place, is today in the planet, if you have to stay on Earth, is likely to be South America, which will be relatively less impacted continent in terms of of the nuclear war impacts. So he would likely take up a bunker, a nuclear bunker, maybe miles underground in South America in an undisclosed location, and may have to live out his days through the war and work from there, kind of like how Hitler worked from his bunker during Second World War. So same way, so this dictator and along with his team of people may have to work from there. And again, so listening to this, it may sound preposterous and what nonsense are you talking? This is complete bullshit. This is the reaction. I can see that already. So, but think about the history of India. This is not preposterous. This is how history of India has always been. What? Again, you'll say, what nonsense you are talking? Let's take the real changers or change makers of India throughout history, starting from Chanakya to Shankaracharya to Mahatma Gandhi. Right, so these people arrived on the scene in India, starting with Chanakya, when the things were looking so dark for India, right? It was as if India was going down the tubes and there was no hope left and everything was almost over. That is the type of scenarios where these men stood up and did what is right to rebuild, reform, reshape India. Right, so starting with Chanakya, and where all did they come from? So Chanakya was thrown out, or he had to leave the kingdom of Magadha, which is with the capital of Pataliputra, that is the present day Patna in Bihar. And where did he end up in? And back in the days, there was no technology. We didn't have planes, cars and whatnot, only like bullock carts or horses and walking. So he came to India from Takshashila, which is like in current day Pakistan. Right, so with his technology, he was as far away from India as he could, a learned man, but far away from India. Same way, next, fast forward 500, 600 years, we come to Shankaracharya, when India was almost going to become Buddhist. Everywhere Buddhism had spread, and it was almost like there is no hope left, and India would become a Buddhist country. Where did Shankaracharya come from? He came from the another remotest corner of India, based on that day's technology again, which is Kerala, which is totally, completely cut off from, or away from, what do you call, everything going on in the North India. And he came from Kerala, which is a faraway place, and he restored Hinduism, traveled all across India, going to Kashmir and everywhere, and reverted India back to Hinduism, right? Ending Buddhism in India. So similarly, another great change maker, coming from learned person, coming from far away from location. Then fast forward another 1,000 years, and when we come to Gandhi, right? So where did Gandhi come from? So now we had better technology. We still didn't have planes probably that much, but we had boats and ships. So Gandhi came to India from South Africa. Right, so he lived, though he is all these people obviously are all Indian, but they lived in faraway places. Right, similarly, Gandhi had gone off to UK, and from there he went to South Africa. Maybe he came to India in between and stayed only for a few months and went to over. But he lived in South Africa for over 20 years before returning to India. And when did he return? He returned at a time when Britain had already won World War I and defeated Germany and Japan already once, right? So at that point, so not Japan in World War I, it is more the Turkish Ottoman Empire, right? So at that point, it looked like as if the British Empire could not end for another 300 years. They are already defeated all the foes. So where is the question? So who else could stand up to Britain and question the empire, right? This is the kind of a dark day that Gandhi arrived in India, and within 30 years, the rest is history. We saw how we got independence and where we are today now. So similarly, continuing in the same pattern, the next change maker, right, the next revolutionary change creator in India will have to come from a place that is even farther than South Africa. So that is another reason why South America seems more appropriate this time. Plus, given the fact that you have to escape from the nuclear bombs going off in World War III, that South America is likely the place where the upcoming dictator Kalki is likely to show up and arrive from, right? So to end this and take over. That's one of the theories. And also, on the education part, so clearly, though there are multiple educated people and millions and crores uneducated in India, it is unlikely that any of them have the exposure and have the understanding of the function, what needs to be changed in India, right, in order to restore it to greatness, and in order to bring it not only in terms of economy and military and all those mights, but also in terms of the cultural roots, right, though, and be the true Hindu, not the fake Hindu that RSS and all these people are. And they are only going to end up in creating Hindu-Muslim riots, right, eventually, with their policies that they are pursuing right now. So when this dictator takes over, let's now think about what is he going to do differently than the current people in democracy that we have been seeing so far, and what are the likely outcomes of these policies over the next 20-30 years into his reign and beyond that. So I imagine a world where we have just World War III has just ended, and crores and millions and billions of people have died, right? There is a very minuscule or very small less amount of population still remaining on earth. Many countries are destroyed, right? Food is scarce, and making a living is so difficult. It's such a terrible state. This could be the time in which this dictator is going to take over India, and he has a job of uniting the people and building back from the ruins, right? This is, think of it like how at the end of the Kurukshetra war in Mahabharata, with so many deaths and all kinds of warriors dead from both sides. So that is the kind of a scene, right? That was still a small scale relative to that day versus today. We cannot even imagine what was the population then and whatnot. So compare that to the scale of population that we have today on the planet, which is 8 billion, right? So that is the kind of death and destruction we are talking about, that we may be looking at that point. Plus we also already went through what the fate of many other countries are going to be like, right? So from this point on, implementing the capitalistic policies that are necessary to be done but have not never been able to be done until now in India under democracies, right, is the first thing that he will embark on. And by that point we will have had enough fighting over Hindu Muslim and whatnot and everything else, that I don't think there will be time for more fighting. Right, there will be more about getting together and rebuilding at that point. And as also in terms of, while rebuilding, going back to the original roots of India, right, that the British have brainwashed us. We have lost our language, we have lost our culture, we have lost our clothing, we have lost everything that we that is of true Indian origin, and we just now ape the West and follow the British masters and do whatever things that they taught us, right, like watching cricket or wearing shirt pant and speaking English, right, thinking like the Western guy, democracy is the greatest. All these kind of brainwashing that has been fed to us will be totally erased, and a new generation of Indians will be raised who will be not only capitalistic and will be more about economy and development, but also will not lose their roots, will be reborn in their roots of Sanskrit speaking, Indian clothes, Indian thinking, right? All these will also be inculcated among the kids. Though India will at that point be growing with the policies at 15% to 20% GDP growth would be the focus, so that within 10 to 15 years of going through these policies, India should become the unquestionable superpower of the entire world by the year 2047. Right, so having taken over in the year around, I don't know, 2030 to 2035, in that range. So Kalki the dictator will have about 10 to 15 years approximately in order to rebuild India and make it the unquestionable number one superpower of the world, with nobody close second even. Right, so that is where he will be taking India too, right? And and also at that point it's no longer going to be called India. That is again a British brainwashing term. It is going to be called Bharat. No longer are we going to have Janagana Mana, which is a song written in the praise of the King of England, as our national anthem. We will be back to Vande Mataram. No longer will tricolor be the flag. The flag will be Bhagwa Hindu, what do you call, colored flag of saffron. So these will be the signs and marks of India, and India will be so prosperous. GDP will be so high, and we will be back on the gold standard, throwing away all these fiat currencies that we are in circulation right now, and the rupee will be the gold, the universal standard of medium of exchange, with India's production in terms of agriculture, manufacturing, in every which way, with no other country coming anywhere close second, right, being the number one unquestionable on top. So that is the kind of India, with the best infrastructure, with the best facilities, amenities, currency, among plentiful food, money, all types of manufactured goods. All these are what are going to be in terms in India by the year 2047 and beyond, right? So now, after having made India at this level, so let's also start thinking about how the structure of the world is going to be. Today we have a UN, we have G20 summits, right? So wherein all these countries, the UN, I think the headquarters is in New York in the United States. G20 I guess keeps rotating each year. The meeting is held in different places. So, and I guess next year, I think the plan is to hold it in India for the G20 summit. So these are the decision makers of the world of the current day, right? Originally it was the G7. Now it has gotten expanded in the last maybe 10-20 years into the G20. So these are the key players. But in the year 2045 and beyond, 2047, is this how the world's United Nations, G20, or whatever decision making body for the world is going to look like? No. With India being the number one superpower with nobody close second, there is not going to be a United Nations, there is no G20, none of this. There is only going to be India as the decider, who is the jury, judge, and the executioner of everything that is going to happen in the world. And the way the United Nations, G20, all these summits are going to look like is the dictator Kalki is going to create a city in India, in the center of India, somewhere in Madhya Pradesh, which where the capital of India will be moved away from New Delhi, which is really not the capital of India, right? It was made more by the Muslim and stuff, but we keep continuing this, and it is being tainted by multiple Muslim rulers who are taking it as the capital or invading it and ransacking it, plus the British themselves occupying it over there for decades, hundreds of years. So we need a new capital for India, and it's likely to be more in the center of India, somewhere in Madhya Pradesh or so, where a totally brand new place will be built, which will last for the next 1,000 years. People are going to talk about this place, or not even 1,000, maybe 5,000 years, as the biggest heaven on earth. Right, so the like we today talk about Acropolis or place like the Roman Empire, all these empires that we have been told about, and how great their palaces were, and how great, how riches were. So none of those will come anywhere close to the comparison to what Kalki is going to build. And this palace is the place where the UN, G20, everything is going to be under Kalki, who is the boss, and nobody else. There is no second, there is no other country involved, no nothing. He is the judge, jury, executioner, right? So whatever the Kalki decides is the rule of the law, and is the rule of whether India or across the world as well. So also, what other economies that day will be the key ones apart from India, right? In the future of 2050 and beyond, if we think, or 2040 and beyond, the West is already going to be in decline, and they are going to be in worse state than what Somalia or Africa, many parts of the West are going to look like that, with hyperinflation, people being pathetic, unable to eat, feed themselves or anything, don't have, without housing, without able to make a living properly. Whereas Africa and South American countries, many of them will have followed in the path of Kalki as well, following some of the steps, taking using capitalism, bringing in capitalism, like for example Rwanda today, with the dictator over there, is really making Rwanda into a Singapore of Africa. So countries like that will have emerged as the new powerful nations with great economies, who will be also given respect in Kalki's darbar and in his in his kingdom, and they will also be consulted and be invited to these summits to to weigh in and provide their input. So if you look at the scene of how a G20 UN summit will be in 1940 onwards, so there is going to be a large palace in which in India, where Kalki sits on the throne, and these countries who have a problem, like the Middle East, or some Eastern European country, or some Eastern Asian country, like somebody around China or someone, they will be coming in to this darbar and presenting their problem. So you can imagine how the olden day Indian kings Asthan used to be, and how problems would be brought in, and the king and his ministers all get together and decide as to what the solution ought to be, and and provide the solution. So that is the kind of a scene in which a G20, UN, all these summits are going to be. On one side of the Kalki, the people sitting will be initially, of course, all his ministers and the people in here who rule India. But beyond that, on one side will be the African economy leaders, and on the other side there will be the South American economy leaders. So now you are going to ask, what about the Western countries, and what about China, and what about all these other countries? So let me explain. So the Western country folks, leaders, would be relegated to jobs like, the sentry at the door who is going to welcome the people, or the folks who will be fanning behind Kalki in a darbar scene that you can think of in an old movie, who will be providing what do you call the who will be serving the king and providing whatever he asks for. Those type of roles will be filled by European leaders, right? And then the king will be sitting in his chair, and then you ask, what about China? Right? So China, though, in today's media you heard China is like the dragon, that's the picture they paint out of it. But really, that is a fake image for China. And dragon anyway is a fake animal. So the real representation of China is not the dragon, it is the panda, right? So a real animal which is very giant, large, but also very soft. So Chinese delegation will generally be women, and and young beautiful women who will be sitting along with Kalki, and Kalki will be touching them and having them as his friends and as his concubines, you can say. And they will be the panda that represents China in the darbar, and once in a while among them, so the Kalki may consult one or two smart women among them and take the decisions accordingly as to what is the solution that ought to be made as well. So this will be the role of China, and this is how the World G20 UN summit, which you think as the decision making bodies for the world today are going to be like under the dictator of India, right? And then what is also the future, right? So with the power of India being returning to this level, back to its original level, and India, with nobody coming close second, the influence of India across all the people of the world will be so immense, right? The equivalent of that today is the influence of American things like drinking Coca-Cola or wearing jeans or going to the disco. Things that America has been marketing across the globe. How powerful those have been, and how everybody around the world want to ape or want to do these things, believing that they are cool, or they want to study in an American university, right? And they're willing to go through whatever lengths. They want to move to America, work in America, live in America. Why? Because America's position today is so preeminent in the globe that things they do is considered as the smart thing or the cool thing, right? So imagine the kind of things that will be considered cool beyond 2040, 2050. Everything that India does will be the most sensible, smart, greatest thing. Whatever Indians wear, whatever Indians eat, whatever Indians believe in, however Indians think, those will be what the world will want to ape and follow. So, and over time, the entire world, is going to become Hindu, right? Not just wearing Indian clothes, thinking Indian stuff, speaking Indian language, like most of the world speaks English today. Because if you went back to the world 200-300 years ago, nobody would have spoken English except outside in the United Kingdom. But today, 60-70% or even 40% of the world speaks English, including most of the European countries in the EU. Though right now UK is not part of the EU, still all the EU countries want to speak English instead of their own languages, right? So English is their common language. So same with India. Most people in India, if two people from different states meet, like if I from Karnataka meet a guy from Andhra, who is my neighboring state, or even from Tamil Nadu, the only language we can commonly speak is English. There is no, at least if I meet a North Indian, I can speak in Hindi. But if I meet another neighboring South Indian, the only language that remains for us is English. How pathetic is that? So imagine when that becomes Sanskrit in the future. So that is the future of India. And from everywhere in the world, like how students used to struggle, go through months of journey to reach Takshashila, to reach Nalanda and such eminent universities of India, and to learn about Hinduism, Buddhism, and the teachings and the knowledge and wealth of India. Similarly, there will be dozens of universities all across India, and India will be leading the world in all fields of research, development, innovation, and everything. And people will be dying to come over to India and learn Indian ways. And eventually, they will be so inspired with these ways, and also, of course, with Kalki taking an active interest in propagating Indian culture, Indian religion, that the entire world, starting initially from the Muslims, right, and initially from people within India, they could be the last ones to convert, but neighboring countries like Pakistan, Iran, and all the way from there, till the end of the tip of Asia, that is till Turkey. Every single country, whoever remains in all these places, converting and becoming a Hindu, giving up eating beef and meat and everything, and 99% becoming vegetarian as well, will be the future of not just Asia, that is to the west of India, but even to the east of India, China, Tibet, all these, Thailand, who are today, there, many of them are already Buddhist countries, but even they are going to quit eating the pork and whatever they eat there a lot today, a lot of this meat, and they're going to turn also to pure vegetarian and adopt Hinduism. And Buddhism may remain, but only in the fringes, like in Japan and places like that. But rest of the entire continent of Asia, as the first place, will be completely truly Hindu, and places like Indonesia, which were always Hindu, will return to complete Hinduism, and there will be no sign of Islam or any other religion seen anywhere in Asia to begin with. But it does not end there. So finally, after a few more years, as the status of India remains unquestionably number one, and it only, the GDP, the strength, the power of India only continues to grow in future generations, probably, which even Kalki may not, the initial dictator may not even live to see those days, but his successors during their time, not just Asia, but entire Europe, South America, Africa, eventually the entire globe is going to be only Hindu and vegetarian. So that is the and living sustainably without wars, ending all wars. Now that they will have seen World War III and how horrible it is, nobody would want war. And given that they have gotten good Hindu teachings as well, which does not make people war prone, like how the Islam or Christianity or even communism or any other religion kind of makes a person more like an animal more than a human, and wanting to fight over all kinds of silly things, right? So those type of tendencies will be eliminated completely, and there is going to be 1,000-year peace, and 1,000 years Hinduism will remain the only religion on this planet, with every other religion voluntarily discarded, and all their places of worship and everything broken down into pieces, ruins, right, completely, with nobody wanting to visit nor care about them any longer in the future. Just like how probably in Europe nobody may care, haven't been caring about a mosque. Like, for example, at some point Spain had a lot of mosques and it was ruled by Muslims, but today, of course, forget the immigration, but previously, before that, you would probably not find mosques in Spain. Similarly, in Middle East or in Saudi Arabia, you will not find remnants of any other religion, though pre-Islam there were all kinds of other religions in this area. So such type of neglect or such type of moving away from these current religions that exist in those places will happen, with Hinduism being the only religion that will be the worldwide accepted religion, and 1,000 years of peace. And also, not that only India will be prosperous and others will be in poverty or anything. Once India achieves this status, they will work with all the different remaining whoever, populations across the globe, no matter what country, the countries that we talk about today, they will cease to exist. Once all are Hindu, it doesn't matter, borders are no longer like the way they are today. And once all the religion language is only Sanskrit, the borders are going to fade. It's all going to be one world. With, yeah, there might be some difference in food and clothing and in things like that, just like we have in India today. With, though everybody is Hindu, they have their own culture, their own clothes, their own festivals, all these type of things that will still exist, and it will become even more diverse with the entire world having different ways. Right. So with that, but there is going to be a 1,000-year peace, and India will help every province, every place across the globe to excel in something, right? Every place can produce a product, or every place can specialize in one type of occupation or one or more type of occupations or one or more types of things that they are really good at doing and be able to contribute into the world. And by in that way they can make their own people also prosperous and have a good life and a good economy in that place. But so that is how the world is going to be amazingly prosperous, with no wars, no conflict. There will be differences of opinion and all these arguments and everything, but they will be settled by talk, not by war, right? Though India may have the army, the leadership of Kalki and his successors will have the greatest army on earth, but the army is rarely needed to be used after an initial period of maybe 20-30 years, until everything is set right, the world is set right, including in India internally as well as the world across as a whole. And after that, though their army can be maintained, it really will not have much of a function other than acting like a police more than than necessarily an army which needs to go to war, like how the American army does every other year today. In order to maintain their hegemon, that is not going to be the status with India. Right. So this is the future that I envision, and that should be obvious for everyone to see. But unfortunately, I am not following why things that are the people are so brainwashed with the Western media, with the British brainwashing, with the universities they go to especially in the United States, liberal schools and whatnot. It is so hard for them to even think the simplest thing logically. Right. And they are just used to believing that, oh no, the way we know democracy is what's happening today, and that's it, that's all is going to happen for the next 5,000 years. And such are the beliefs that it is simply impossible to get any logic or sense through these people. Right. So that is why I have tried to make this video to explain to you how this is going to happen and why this is going to happen, and obviously why it is only that India can do this, right? It is simple. Hinduism is the only religion that has survived the test of time. It is the only peaceful religion on the planet. Every other religion can only lead you to war. And not only that, their things in that religion are complete nonsense. Pardon my being frank about it. Suddenly, on the first day, the God created the planet, the sun and the moon. And then on the second day, he created the earth. The third day, he created man. This is complete, total bunkum. Right? So if this is what they believe in and this is how the book starts, how can anything be more clueless than such nonsense? And you have billions of people brainwashed into believing this kind of things, and then less you say about the religion of peace, the better. Their beliefs and their thinking is even worse, right? It has completely no logical sense whatsoever, unlike the Hinduism and to an extent Buddhism too, which kind of borrowed a lot from Hinduism, but then only there were disagreements in some areas. Right. And Buddha is also, again, I don't know if he's like to be worshipped as a god or something. Right. So anyway, there will be changes in those religions as well. And the worst of them all is communism, where there is no religion or no god or anything. That also has to be gotten rid of completely, because that's another crazy, meaningless, senseless idea. So the only prevalent thing which can provide the peace, the prosperity, and the sense, and make people human, right, from the current animals that they are in majority of the places around the globe, is only Hinduism. And that is the only thing that can survive, and that is the only thing that can deliver for the entire world. So it's so simple. And also that India is the only place which has the population. Yes, it may not have the power today, thanks to brainwashing, thanks to all the things that have happened in history for the for the last 1000 years against India. So though they have the population today, they may not have the economy or the military power, but that is going to be going to change over the next 20-30 years under the dictatorship of Kalki. And this is the future that we will be seeing, right? So that's what I wanted to explain. And this is not, my thinking is not based on some astrological videos I watched, or some Nostradamus theory I heard, or things like that that people want to believe in, or some books that are there in Indian mythology, or not exactly mythology, written by Indian future seers, or any of that. Those all corroborate the common sense that I see, right? If I am showing those videos as saying, okay, look, this guy also says the same thing, it is just to corroborate that what I am saying is not nonsense. Some other person has also seen something similar. He might have gotten to the same conclusion from a different angle, looking at it from a whatever astrological or a psychic approach, or I don't know, whatever the approach they might have taken to get to that result. But bottom line is, we have arrived at the same conclusion, me using just logic and common sense, and the other person using whatever means that they might have used for getting to the same place, right? So, and then there are millions who did not reach the same place, and who are completely wrong and completely clueless and cannot see what is happening. And they believe, like, America is going to be the superpower for the next 1000 years, or whatever, world is going to end, and or Islam is going to take over the whole world, and everybody will become Muslim, right? So everybody has their own foolish thoughts which are not logical, but they are free to believe and live in those thoughts and ideas until they get the wake up call from Kalki. And then they start getting sense, and becoming and moving into the right approach, and the right thinking, and the right actions. All right. So until then, until all these brainwashings are removed and the right things have been made clear for everybody, sure, there is going to be a lot of misgivings in the world. But luckily, there are at least a few people who can see sense, who are not completely brainwashed, and though despite education and everything, who just cannot see sense. Like luckily, there is a handful of them at least who do see the sense, and who have understood and gotten to the right approach, that this is where the world is going to be heading, right? And this is the only likely outcome, or most likely outcome, with almost, I would say, at this point 90+% certainty, maybe even 99, if not 100, right? So my intention of making this video is to help you understand. Yes, I know it's a very long one, but I had to give you the complete picture of how, where, when, why, what way, answer all your various different questions, address them as much as I can, and explain the full end-to-end story. So that's what I have tried to attempt here. And hope you are able to understand and appreciate this. And hopefully, if we are all lucky, we will get to live through this. And you would want to make preparations. You can ignore this as nonsense, and this guy's gone crazy, he saw too many Hollywood movies, or whatever it is that, or he's got brainwashed by RSS or whoever, something you can believe. But if you ignore me completely and not prepare for the next coming days or years as to what might happen on this planet with Democrats and RSS in power, right, then you are going to live in your own peril, and so nobody can help you at that point when things really get ugly. So I hope you don't take this as a joke lightly, and we all can take precaution and we survive to see the day when Kalki comes and he takes over India and ends World War III before the planet ends. Right, so and we can all live through for the next 30, 20, 30, 40 years, whatever, however, based on your age, right, and see these things happening in this world. Okay, thank you very much. Until our next video. Bye now.